President.
Senator from Arkansas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to join many of my colleagues in raising our voices on behalf of some of the most vulnerable members of our society. Recently, a very disturbing and revealing discussion has been taking place in our country that raises serious questions about how much value and worth we ascribe to babies in the womb, and especially those who are born despite an attempted abortion procedure. But before I go any further, let me say this clearly and unequivocally. If we as a nation are to hold any claim to a moral character that deserves to be admired and emulated, then we must be willing to say that the lives of newborn children have inherent value and are worthy of protection. There is simply no way to credibly claim otherwise. Whether it be legislation introduced or enacted by state legislatures or comments made by public officials such as the governor of Virginia, our country has begun to entertain the idea that the rights and privileges of the newborn babies possess is an open-ended question. This is alarming, and the United States Senate should go on the record in the defense of their right to live instead of being callously discarded or worse, intentionally killed in the name of reproductive freedom. There is no middle ground here. It is concerning to me that in some corners of this country, and even within this Congress, there is an utter failure to recognize and affirm the right to life, especially after an infant has already been born. Throughout my time in elected office, I have found that giving those who disagree with me on any given issue the benefit of the doubt as it relates to their motivations, it has allowed me to consistently find commonality and reach compromise, even with incredibly unlikely allies and partners. But in this instance, there can be no mistake or ambiguity. The common ground that we all must occupy should be a shared commitment to uphold a basic, fundamental right to protect the life of every child, no matter the circumstances of his or her birth. Which brings me to the legislation before the Senate today. I'm a co-sponsor of the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, and I'm grateful to each of my colleagues who supported the bill tonight. This legislation would create criminal penalties for doctors who allowed infants to die rather than provide medical care after an attempted abortion. It would also require that born alive abortion survivors be transported to a hospital for care and treatment rather than being left to languish on the counter of an abortion clinic, or, as one former nurse and pro-life activist has shockingly recounted, be discarded along with the biohazard materials. Even in situations where comfort care is rendered to these little ones, that sometimes amounts to nothing more than keeping a baby warm until it passes away alone. No child should suffer this way. Under this bill, abortionists who defy these mandates to render care to born alive survivors would face the justice that they are due instead of being ignored or permitted to continue committing infanticide. It is time for our country to demand that the victims of this abhorrent, inhumane treatment be afforded their rights and the perpetrators be held accountable. Speaking with one clear voice, we must say that every human being is made in the image of God and is therefore in possession of dignity and worth that cannot be displaced or dispossessed. Anything short of this unambiguous declaration would be a tremendous disservice to our children and fatally undermine the values of our society that we claim to uphold. While the debate surrounding abortion has engulfed this country for decades, the goalposts are now being shifted. Reproductive autonomy, we are now told, must include the ability and choice to end the life of a baby who survives an attempted abortion. As a former medical provider, I believe that to end a newborn's life, either by refusing to provide life-saving care or actively taking that child's life, as in the case of the infamous abortionist Dr. Kermit Gosnell and others, violates the oath every medical provider takes to do no harm. As a dad and a grandfather, I know from my own experience just how precious each life is. My daughters and grandchildren are treasured gifts that bring my family immeasurable joy and meaning. To think that they or any other child might be treated with anything other than the dignity and respect they are entitled to is a tragic, heartbreaking, and outrageous. Providing necessary medical attention to the lives of infants who survive an abortion is an imperative that we as a society must embrace if we are to be faithful to the promise our founders made to the generations of Americans that would succeed them. In declaring the self-evident truth that all men are created equal, surely they intended to extend the same rights and liberties that their countrymen fought and died for to newborn babies who survive abortions. I'm proud to have stood with my colleagues today in support of this legislation that seeks to protect these precious, vulnerable lives. We can and should do this as a reflection of the country we want to be. Our abortion laws in the United States already situate us among some of the world's worst human rights abusers, including North Korea and China. Now, a national conversation about whether to provide children who survive abortions, whether or not we give them medical attention and care, has ensued. It is my hope and prayer that the final word in this discussion will end with a resounding commitment to protect and preserve life. I'd like to thank the junior senator from Nebraska, Senator Sass, for leading on this critical issue and pushing to bring this measure to the floor today. I would also like to thank the President for his vocal commitment to defending life and protecting the most vulnerable among us. I feel blessed to stand alongside so many others to raise our voices on behalf of the voiceless. While I'm disappointed with the result of today's vote, I remain committed to fighting for those who are unable to fight for themselves and will continue working to protect and uphold the sanctity of life.